They called her the Beast in the sack long before the cowboy ever laid eyes on the thing that breathed, and cried beneath that stitched canvas, long before fear learned to crawl into his bones like winter cold, through cracked boots, and long before the truth dared to show its face in the dust-bitten frontier town of Red Hollow. Legends were born the way vultures circled, slow, ugly, and hungry. Folks swore the beast wasn't human, that it had claws curled like sickles and a mouth that could swallow a man's scream whole. They said it was dragged in years ago from the Badlands by bounty hunters who lost half their crew on the way back. They said the sack moved at night. They said it whispered. They said if you listened too long, you'd hear your own sins calling your name. So the town locked it away in the old slaughter shed behind the abandoned stockyard, chained the sack like it was alive, and fed it scraps the way you'd feed a dog you planned to drown someday. And every time someone went missing, runaways, drunks, widows with no kin, Red Hollow, he found comfort in believing the beast had eaten again, because monsters were easier than guilt. The cowboy, whose name was Eli Mercer, rode into town on a limping bay horse with ribs showing through skin like prison bars, carrying his own ghosts in the lines around his eyes. Eli had seen monsters before, men wearing badges, men wearing scripture, men wearing smiles, but he'd learned young that fear was often just pain with a louder voice. He came to Red Hollow looking for work and silence, but the town offered neither. From the moment he tied his horse and stepped into the saloon, whispers followed him thick as smoke. Outsiders always heard about the beast eventually. It was how Red Hollow tested whether you belonged, believed the lie, or asked the wrong questions. Eli heard the story in pieces, over clinking glasses, through trembling laughter, in warnings slurred by men who smelled like rot and regret. He didn't laugh. He didn't flinch. What caught him wasn't the horror of it, but the way people spoke of the beast, like it was already dead, like whatever lived inside that sack had forfeited the right to be alive the moment it became inconvenient. That night, Eli dreamed of his little sister Sarah, gone these 12 years, her face half hidden behind burlap, her voice muffled as she begged him not to leave her again. He woke before dawn with his heart hammering and a decision he didn't yet have words for. By morning, he'd taken a job hauling feed for old man Ketter, whose cattle were dying slow. And it was Ketter who first warned him plain. "Don't go near the shed," the old man rasped, eyes darting like hunted prey. "That thing ain't a woman, ain't an animal neither. It's God's punishment." Eli just nodded, but his gaze drifted toward the far edge of town where the slaughter shed leaned crooked, boards blackened by old blood and newer fear. For days he worked, listened, watched. He noticed how food went missing, from plates left unattended, how children swore they heard crying carried on the wind at night, how no one could quite explain who fed the beast or why the sack was always clean of blood. On the fourth night, a storm rolled in like judgment, thunder cracking the sky open, rain turning the dirt to sucking mud. That was when Eli took his lantern and walked toward the shed. Every step felt like crossing a line he'd never uncross. But he kept going because some part of him had already decided that whatever was in that sack deserved at least one pair of eyes that didn't look away. The lock on the shed door was rusted, more for show than strength, and it gave with a groan that sounded too much like a warning. Inside, the smell hit him first, not rot, not death, but damp cloth, old wounds and human fear. The lantern light shook as his hand trembled, and then he saw it, a large sack suspended from chains, stained with dirt and rain, twitching faintly like something dreaming of escape. He stood there a long moment, heart pounding so loud he feared it would wake the town. Then softly he spoke. "I ain't here to hurt you." The sack stilled. From inside came a sound so small, so broken, it near split him in two, a whimper unmistakably human. Eli swallowed hard and stepped closer. He knelt, setting the lantern down, and for the first time noticed the careful stitching, the way the sack had been repaired again and again, as if someone once cared enough to keep whatever was inside alive. "What did they do to you?" he whispered. The answer came not in words, but in sobs raw and ragged. the kind that come from a place too deep for language. Against every warning, every legend, Eli reached out and laid his hand against the sack. Beneath the rough fabric, he felt a heartbeat. Fast, terrified, real. In that moment, the beast of Red Hollow died, and something far more dangerous was born, the truth. And as thunder roared overhead, Eli Mercer realized he wasn't looking at a monster at all, but at a woman the world had decided was easier to chain than to understand. If this story has gripped your heart so far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will change everything Eli thought he knew about fear, courage, and what it truly means to be human. By the time dawn began to thin the storm clouds into pale ribbons of gray, Eli Mercer had already crossed the point of no return, because once you hear a human heart beating where a monster is supposed to be, you can never again pretend the lie is harmless. He stayed in the slaughter shed through the night, sitting on the cold dirt with his back against the wall, speaking softly to the woman in the sack, the way one might speak to a frightened horse. Slow words, steady words, telling her his name, telling her she wasn't alone, telling her that whatever they had done to her did not make her a beast. At first, she answered only with breath and shivers, but as the hours passed, her fear loosened its grip enough for broken sounds to form words. And through those words, Eli learned the truth Red Hollow had buried. Her name was Mara. Years ago, she had been sold to a traveling show because of her size and strength, paraded as a freak, beaten when she refused to perform, until she escaped and staggered half-dead into Red Hollow begging for water. The town gave her chains instead. Every disappearance blamed on her had been a lie. People left town because Red Hollow crushed the weak. And the beast was a story they told themselves so they could sleep. When Eli finally unlocked the chains and cut the stitching open, Mara didn't lunge or roar. She curled in on herself, shielding her face, whispering apologies like she expected pain to follow freedom. That sight burned something clean and furious into Eli's chest. At sunrise, the town gathered, drawn by rumors and courage borrowed from daylight, and they found not a monster, but a woman wrapped in Eli's coat, standing behind him with shaking hands. Anger rose fast, ugly and loud, men shouting about curses and danger. But the spell broke when a child stepped forward and offered Mara a canteen, because children still recognize truth before fear teaches them otherwise. One by one, eyes dropped. Shame does that. Eli didn't preach. He didn't threaten. He simply said, "You don't get to call her a beast anymore. Not after what you made her survive." Red Hollow didn't suddenly become good, but it became quieter, and sometimes that's how change begins. Eli left town that same day with Mara riding beside him, two wounded souls choosing motion over rot. And as they disappeared into the open land, the legend of the beast in the sack died for good, replaced by something harder to ignore, the memory of a town that almost forgot its own humanity. If this ending moved you, remember there are many more powerful, emotional stories like this waiting for you. Subscribe to the channel and ride with us into the next legend where truth is braver than fear and compassion is the strongest force of all.